Hi everyone, my name is Chad Holbrun, and I'll be presenting the first half of Chapter 7, Verbal Dynamics in Small Groups Through Territoriality. And this chapter is basically about communication itself. In this presentation, I'll outline verbal dynamics in small groups, listening, importance of nonverbal communication in groups, and applications of nonverbal communication research to groups. Now, words are tools that help people make sense of the world and share that sense with others, as we learned in Chapter 6. When group members feel a need to protect themselves, they shift their attention, which can create barriers to effective group process. And then there are 3 barriers to communication. The first is bypassing, the second is allness, and the third is fact inference confusion. Now, bypassing happens when 2 people assign different meanings to the same word, and that can be avoided by using specific language and when people are aware of multiple interpretations of what they're saying. And allness is a statement that is simple, but it's an untrue generalization, which can be avoided by not overgeneralizing and remembering that individuals are unique. And fact inference confusion occurs when people respond to something as if they actually observed it, when in reality they have only drawn a conclusion. And that can be avoided when people clarify and analyze and learn the difference between fact and inference. Okay. The next few slides we will cover listening, referring to listening styles, listening obstacles, and a guide to active listening. And listening is an active process through which people select, attend, understand, and remember. Listening styles. It's a style that you prefer for a way of making sense out of the spoken messages you hear. And there are 4 preferred listening styles: people-oriented listeners, action-oriented listeners, content-oriented listeners, and time-oriented listeners. Now, people-oriented listeners, those are people who are most comfortable listening to other people's feelings and emotions. Action-oriented listeners prefer information that is well organized, brief, and free of any errors. And content-oriented listeners like information-rich content. And time-oriented listeners prefer brief messages. And obstacles to effective listening are prejudging the communicator or the communication and rehearsing a response. Now, prejudging the communication, we don't want to prejudge others based on their culture or ethnicity or race. And rehearsing a response, it's the tendency people have to rehearse in their minds what they will say when the other person stops speaking. And the thought-speech differential is better used to fully attend to what the speaker is saying and also what the speaker is not saying. And here we have a guide to active listening, which is to stop, look, listen, ask appropriate questions, paraphrase content, and paraphrase feelings. So for the first one, we want to stop and put our thoughts aside, and we want to mentally be there and make a conscious and mindful effort to listen and to take the time to listen. We don't want to rush the speaker. And we're going to look for clues that would help us identify how the other person is feeling, and we're going to listen for what the other person is telling us. and we're going to match verbal cues with nonverbal cues to decipher content and emotion of the person's message. And we're also going to ask appropriate questions to 1. Obtain additional information, 2. Find out how someone is feeling, 3. To get clarification of a word or phrase, and 4. To verify conclusions about the other person's meaning or their feeling. And paraphrase content, we're going to restate in our own words what we think the other person is saying. Now, the importance of nonverbal communication in groups. Now, nonverbal communication is a communication behavior that does not rely on written or spoken words, including body posture, movement, eye contact, facial expression, seating arrangements, spatial relationships, personal appearance, use of time, and tone. And here, more time is actually spent communicating nonverbally than it is verbally, and emotions and feelings are typically expressed nonverbally than verbally, and nonverbal messages are usually more verbal than verbal messages. Okay, and the next few slides we're going to cover application of nonverbal communication research to groups, which include posture, movement, and gestures, eye contact, facial expressions, vocal cues, personal space, and territoriality. Posture, movement, and gestures. So there's 5 different types of nonverbal behavior, which include emblems, illustrators, effect display, regulators, and adapters. Now, emblems are movements and gestures that replace spoken language. For example, group members shaking their heads to communicate no. Illustrators would be nonverbal behaviors that add meaning to accompany verbal communication. For example, a group member holds their hands 3 feet apart while saying we'll need about a yard of fabric. And the effect display is expressions of feeling. For example, frowning, smiling, grimacing, and regulators are nonverbal behavior that control the flow of communication within the group. So for example, that would be eye contact, raising a hand or finger to signal you would want to talk. And adapters are nonverbal acts that satisfy personal needs and help group members adapt to their environment. For example, searching, yawning, or adjusting glasses. Eye contact. So, eye contact happens in small groups, and it serves one or more functions such as cognitive, monitoring, regulatory, expressive. Now, cognitive indicates thought process. Monitoring is how we seek feedback from others when communicating with them, for example, how your message is being received. Regulatory is regulating back and forth flow of communication to signal when the communication channel is open or closed. And expressive provides information about feelings and emotions and attitudes. Here we have facial expressions, and facial expressions are significant because of close proximity of communicators in small groups. And the face can produce thousands of facial expressions, which are identifiable. For example, people communicate happiness with the area around their eyes with a smile and raised cheeks, or they communicate disgust with raised upper lip, wrinkled nose, lower eyelids. Or people will communicate they're angry with lowered eyebrows and stare intensely. Vocal cues. Vocal cues are referred to as paralanguage. It involves the pitch, the rate, the volume, and the quality of your voice, and they're all important in determining the meaning of the message. And here we have personal space and territoriality, and we'll go over personal space first. Personal space is about proximities. It's about how close or how far away we choose to be to other people. Now, personal space is about spatial zones that are observed by people in Western cultures. And as we can see from the diagram, intimate space is 0 to 1.5 feet away. Personal space is 1.5 to 4 feet. Social space is 4 to 12 feet. And public space is 12 feet and beyond. Now, territoriality, that's a term generally used in the study of animals, but humans also exhibit this trait as well. And it's a way for members of a group to signify they're claiming territory by placing objects in front of them and or around them. So next time you're at a meeting, take a look and notice how posture and gesture change when people start invading space. And that concludes my video.